Craig Mackinlay. He's a former Conservative MP for South Thanet. And I've just been told, Craig, that as of tomorrow, you will be Lord Mackinlay of Richborough, my good lord.
Thank you very much, Julia. Yes, it should be tomorrow is the date that my letters patent will be officially sealed by the King. So tomorrow is the day.
Excellent.
Yes, looking forward to that very much.
I don't approve of peerages and honours and the House of Lords, but if we're going to have them, I damn well want Craig Mackinlay to get them and be in the House of Lords. So that is great news to have some more people speaking sense in the House of Lords. Craig, I don't even know where to start, but I think we should probably start the latest immigration figures. I've rattled through them 2 or 3 times in the last few hours. Whether or not it goes down 1 year or up 1 year, or basically a huge number of people come to this country, mostly legally, with visas from the government to work, including their dependents, 1.1 million or so in the year to June 2024. Now, that was under a Tory government, as before, long before, Keir Starmer was in charge. We've also got a huge number of people coming illegally, although in smaller numbers. How big an issue do you think this is going to be over the next 5 years for Labour?
I think it'll be a huge issue. I mean, it's a huge issue for us. It was one of the reasons I think that people have turned away from us, frankly, because for the last number of elections that I can even remember, we always have in our manifesto, Conservative manifesto, that we will reduce migration numbers. And you remember David Cameron back in 2010, before that election, said he'd like to get it into the tens of thousands.
Should we all have a little reminiscent chuckle at that? Oh, the good old days.
And now we've sort of got a new elite that says, well, if you're talking about lower levels of migration, it's thou dare not speak about such things, you must be racist. Well, that is total nonsense. We need to talk about it. This is a big issue on the street. And if polls are to be believed, recent ones, it has now gone back up the list as the #1 issue in people's minds. Yeah. And I'm really not surprised. So, the numbers are looking like they're down on the back of our policy of restricting the particularly students' dependents coming over, which in itself should never have happened in the first place, in my view. I'm not entirely sure what other countries do. If you get a scholarship to Australia, whether you're allowed to sort of bring the whole family with you, I very much doubt that. These are good news, but they're on the back of what we did. But it's really not very good news because hundreds of thousands, frankly, continues to give us a major problem. Yeah. We then look at our infrastructure. We then look at housing. We've got a massive housing issue. How can you solve a housing issue when you plan, if Angela Rayner's plans are anything to be believed or deliverable, we plan for about 300,000 new homes a year. But by the way, we're having a net import of about 5, 6, 7, 800,000 people. Yeah. It doesn't make the thing get any better, does it?
No, and exactly. And it's not the fault of people who've come here, particularly those who've come here legally. They've done everything right. They want to come and study here or work here. They're not at fault. But the government, they're not creating that problem. But we've had government after government after government. Labour, it was happened massively under scale under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, and then followed with Cameron and Theresa May and everyone else since, with this huge scale of net immigration without the house building and the extra infrastructure to go along with it.
Well, I mean, let's just put that aside, the house building. I wouldn't particularly want us to be building 500,000 new homes a year because I think it's completely unnecessary. But let's get back to why we have this issue of having massive amounts of legal migration. Let's put the legal bit aside. The French could solve that in a fortnight, should they so wish. I think we've discussed that before. But let's look at the legal migration. You have employers who, in my view, have not been willing to upskill our own domestic people into the jobs that we need. So I'm not really surprised.
Goodness, sorry. Something's ringing. Help.
Do its stuff. I'm not really surprised that employers, because they can, go, we'll just import that labour because it's very easy to do.
Craig, can we turn off whatever that alarm is, or it's someone that's sending an email or something?
So employers then look to import people because it's an easy thing to do and the government have allowed them to do so. Yep. And then, by the way, we have 9.5 million people of working age on some form of, they're not working at all. Yep. And some millions on a form of working age benefit. Yep. I mean, my view would be we upskill our own, be a little bit more robust to the poor dears who say, oh, I don't want to go to work and I just sit on benefits for the rest of my life.
I wouldn't be a little bit more robust. I'd be very robust indeed.
I was being diplomatic and conservative, Julia, but I think you know what I mean. And get those into work. And if we still have a skills problem after we've managed to get our unemployed into work and those who want to upskill, get them upskilled, then we might look at foreign migration to fill the gap left. But we've been lazy, we've taken the easy option, and I'm afraid that easy option is now not looking so easy because you've got a problem of housing, infrastructure.
And again, it's easy for the businesses.
We're getting problems with community cohesion as well, which is a big thing that nobody wants to talk about.
And that was, again, doesn't justify, but it is partially explains what's happened with riots recently. People feeling angry, people feeling untrusting, and people feeling they don't matter anymore. And they're just shouting racist and bigot at everybody. Doesn't actually solve the problem. But this is it has been the easy solution if you're a government minister and you want your figures to look really good and your GDP goes up, because more people, oh, what a surprise. You basically, it looks better. It's easier for businesses. I'd rather have a 35-year-old with loads of experience from Eastern Europe who will take the same wages I'd have to pay an 18-year-old who's got no experience. It's a no-brainer, and it's been really easy for those the middle-class elites, of which I am one in North London. You can employ your nanny, your cleaner. Labour is available. Absolutely, you get your builders and everything. That's fine, but it's not been easy for people who've seen their local communities change beyond all recognition, when half the people, if not more, at the school gate don't speak your language, where you can't get housing. You're competing for jobs. You're competing for homes. You're competing for a GP surgery. If I go in my local GP surgery, if I'm standing in a queue to talk to the receptionist, the odds are the person in front doesn't speak a word of English, and it's a conversation that takes half an hour because no one can understand each other. And people living with the impact of that, I'm afraid, it's not been easy.
Well, just before I came on, you mentioned a minority that is often overlooked, and that's white working class people.
Yeah.
I mean, they have been the people who have suffered because of mass migration, because those jobs that they might otherwise have been able to do have been closed to them because employers have reached for, let's be honest, very often well-skilled, very enthusiastic, hard-working people, and who can blame them? I've always raised this as a conundrum, and actually obviously got pilloried for it, as I often do, Julia, but I don't care, is how come during the age when we were in the European Union, you had youngsters willing to get a cheap bus across Europe from Bucharest to come and work in our farms, but areas of high youth unemployment in the UK weren't even willing to travel a couple of 100 miles to have a great summer in the sun with a load of good friends. I mean, it would just seem a bizarre conundrum to me. But no, the poor dears had to have a job on their doorstep, or probably more than likely they couldn't be bothered to take the job.
Well, exactly, and they had that option. I mean, what do you make also of this possibility of Labour looking at free movement returning for under 30s in the EU? There's a quote from the Times. They've got a government source. Look, these people know who they're talking to, saying, well, no one will say it publicly at this stage. There is an acknowledgement that this is an area where we will need to move. If we're serious about resettling relations with the EU, which Keir Starmer and Labour are obsessed with doing, then we need to be prepared to give them some of the things that they want, and this is one of the things that they want. Is this just a very cunning little wheeze where basically it's an attempt to reverse Brexit, basically doing it by the back door?
Well, you have to be very worried about Labour's intention on Brexit, because Keir Starmer, now the Prime Minister, was the shadow Europe Minister, and was it 26 times or more tried to reverse Brexit once the second referendum, all the rest of it. Well, you don't have to have a very long memory to know where he stands on this. But you might be surprised to hear I'm a little bit more relaxed about this youth arrangement, because we do have similar with other countries around the world, including Australia, Canada, even Japan. So it's not as strange as you might think. Sorry, Julia, I really can't stop that. That is my diabetes monitor saying my level is a little bit wrong, but let's crack on.
Right, well, OK, well, if you need to go, let us know. But
let me explain why you might be surprised. It is actually more difficult now to get an au pair from the EU than it was before we were ever an EU member. And that seems a rather bizarre situation because these can be mutually beneficial. My worry is, do we start going back into Erasmus, which allows EU students to come here at a cheap rate, often then taking out a student loan that never gets repaid because they disappear and are never seen again? These are the slippery slope things I'm worried about, not in itself the ability to come here and work for a couple of years on a reciprocal basis. I think that's an entirely different thing. And it is still widely used with other countries around the world that we are obviously friendly with, and Australia, Japan.
Absolutely, and we want to have good relations. But the point is, what do we have to give up? What do we, have to do? Because we don't say to, for instance, Japan or Australia or Canada, yes, in return for this, you can basically set all the rules for our borders. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Can I ask you just about some people looking ahead to the first Labour budget on October the 30th, and Rachel Reeves.
Julia, I hate to think.
Well, apparently she's begun to lay the groundwork for what they're calling a tax raid on jobs. The public sector pay rises have gone up. We've got a surge in borrowing. Of course, Rachel Reeves constantly surprised by everything that was publicly available to her before she was Chancellor. But there's talk about an increase in employers' national insurance contributions. Now, employee national insurance contribution rates and income tax and VAT rates, they promised they would not raise those, but they didn't mention employers. Now, this is basically what people are calling a tax on jobs. This will say to an employer, if you want to employ someone, we're going to make you pay more to do that. I mean, what on earth could go wrong?
My position is very clear, Julia. When I was in Parliament and there was that potential of rising national insurance to pay for a new care scheme, well, we still haven't solved the problem of how we fund care, but I opposed that then for a very simple reason. We tax things that are deemed to be bad. We tax things like alcohol. We tax things like cigarettes. We should not be taxing things that are deemed to be good. And in my book, jobs are good. So we must not tax them further. Now, I think we're going to see a lot of this with Labour. Obviously, they may not raise headline rates for employees, but there are plenty other ways of squeezing a bit more tax out of a lot more people. Now, the one that I'm most concerned about is a backdoor route to a type of wealth tax, which will be a rebanding of homes based on value, which could see some substantial increases, particularly in London, the home counties, and all those people who may have been tempted to actually vote Labour for the first time that had done for a long time. They actually probably voted Lib Dem, a lot of them in some Surrey and home counties. But they will be getting, I'm afraid, their comeuppance with a Labour government who will be hitting various types of wealth taxes, CGT, some inheritance tax reliefs, and I think it's going to defer and put off investment, and investment is what we need if Labour's to be believed that they want growth, but I'm not entirely sure they believe it themselves. What they do believe is paying their union bosses and staff and all the rest of it, everyone else on the public payroll, a hefty amount on the back of people who are striving away, trying to do normal jobs and do the creative stuff in the economy. It's old Labour dressed up for 2024. It's just as frightening as the old days, unfortunately.
I have to say, it has been quite extraordinary, the payouts we've seen. And again, we've seen immediately more strike action being threatened and more unions go, well, hold on a minute, I'd like my share. And you mentioned growth. Everything that Labour say they want to do is basically, premised on that there will be growth. But among the things, you campaigned for Brexit, you campaigned against lockdowns. You also, senior figure, you founded the Net Zero Scrutiny Group of MPs as well, playing a crucial role, actually raising some of the questions about that. You can't have growth in any Western industrialised nation if you don't have affordable, abundant energy, do you? And net zero won't deliver that.
It can't deliver it. I mean, if you're after some sort of miracle to come out of windmills and solar panels that need an awful lot of energy input to make them, an awful lot of copper, steel and aluminium and concrete to actually match them up to the grid, then a load more of them because of the irregularity of wind and solar, you're into fantasy land. And now the only way you can have economic growth and the type of industry that we want, and it doesn't keep going abroad, is to have cheaper energy. Now, you ought to look, I mean, it's happening now as we speak. It's happening in South Wales with the steel industry is almost on its knees, just about really to be closed down, frankly, with blast furnaces going. And do you know why? It's because our energy is so expensive. No other reason. we will still get steel, but it'll be made in India or China or somewhere else that has cheap energy, and then we'll stick it on a diesel ship back to the UK. It's a policy you could not make up.
It is genuinely insane. When I actually challenge people on this, and they say, well, you're a climate denier. I mean, that's just, you just shout, again, as with anything we discuss, immigration, whatever topic we discuss, you know, you just shout insults. No, it's not possible to do what you say is possible to do. It won't achieve what you think it will do. And anyone who's looked at this must know that, and yet in the heart of government, they're still pushing for it. That said, your lot, the Tories, were doing the same thing. They pushed a few of the dates back, but fundamentally just as insane. So what do we do? What do ordinary people do who rely on having affordable energy, who rely on having a job in manufacturing, or like, what do they do?
Well, I wrote a piece in the Telegraph today, the comments section. I recommend you have a read. It covers a lot of these issues. The energy policy we're pursuing will not work. And I started the Net Zero Scrutiny Group whilst being part of a Conservative government because I felt what was happening was going off the rails. And that was particularly under Boris Johnson, you know, a man I really like. But his energy policy was truly appalling. Now, very few countries have actually embedded in legislation net zero. Only about 11 countries around the entire world of 200 odd have actually embedded it in legislation. It's now being used by anti-growth activists on just about every application for roads, for airports, for whatever you fancy. They say, 2050, net zero. You can't build that because it will mean the release of CO2. Yep. So we're now getting bound up in that regeneration and infrastructure development, which Labour say they want to do because of our 2050 commitment. Frankly, there's only one thing we can do. We need to take the foot off the pedal of that, go back to where most countries around the world are. You know, very well, we can traipse along to COP27, 8, 9, 30, whatever, and the one comes around the corner next. We can nod sagely with everyone else, do some of the right things, obviously, but there's dirty things as a planet that we can put right now, that sort of plastics and what I call proper dirty emissions. But we're never going to get to CO2 neutrality by 2050. No. It is not possible globally. And by the way, China and India are taking very little notice of all of that.
They just...
and Britain is 1% of a global outputter. So quite frankly, if you were to cut off the whole of the UK today and we were running around in bearskins to keep warm, it would make absolutely no difference to CO2 output of the world.
I fear that's where we're going to end up with the madness of these policies. All credit to you speaking up on all these big issues. As of tomorrow, Craig Mackinlay, former Tory MP for Southend, is going to become Lord Mackinlay and will be sitting in the Lords when it resits. So appreciate you joining us, talking sense on everything. Craig Mackinlay, thank you very much.